Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the ALLCAPS podcast number 10 for the Aotearoa Legalise Cannabis Party. My very special guest joining me today is the Mayor of the Horowhenua, Mr. Michael Feyen. Welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Yeah, good morning, Vinny, and to everybody that's watching.
Indeed. Now, the one thing I would like to get you to do is sort of introduce yourself to the audience, your background and what it is you do, because the Legalise Cannabis Party has three platforms, recreational use, medical cannabis, but here today we're mostly going to be focusing on industrial hemp, which is your expertise. So if you could give a bit of background on yourself and how you got into that subject matter, we'd be much obliged.
Yeah, no worries at all. I don't know about expertise. I'm learning as I go. But my name is Michael Feyen. I'm the Mayor of Horowhenua. I'm very, very interested in hemp and the changes that are going to happen in legislation to allow various usages of hemp. And that's where I met you at the seminar recently, or the two-day seminar in the Hemp Summit in Wellington. So now I find myself sitting in front of you here, Vinny, and awaiting your questions.
What got you interested in industrial hemp? Was it on a personal basis, or were you looking more about your constituency as the Mayor of the Horowhenua?
Well, I think a lot of it's tied in with local people that have often talked about this. And when the Hemp Summit came up, and I'd been doing a little bit of background work in terms of the range and the scope of product that hemp can make, I became very, very interested, especially in the fibre and in the seed aspect of it.
Well, what do you think? Oh, sorry about that. What do you think it would actually be able to do? I mean, in terms of the local economy?
Oh, I think that hemp would be huge in this area, given that in the past it all had to do with flax and harakeke, and the finished product was actually called hemp. But I really like the notion of hemp because it's a carbon credit crop to start with. It takes the nutrient out of the runoff out of the soil and the carbon out of the air. So given all of the things that it could be everything from pollution, matting to insulation, building materials, obviously food and healthy food at that. Opportunities around the clothing industry and textile industry. We could replace plastic bag with hemp bags. It can be used for fuselages of planes or bodies of cars. I mean, it's just endless. And what I heard at that summit just made me think, well, here we've got employment opportunities that aren't just based around killing chickens or picking vegetables in this area for young people.
Yeah. I wonder as well if it's not just isolated to certain communities and what kind of growing areas there could be across the wider nation and the potential for this crop in terms of cash for the rural economy to a large degree.
Well, from what I was hearing at that summit, it's pretty much second only to dairying in terms of possibility of income. And that's what I'm very interested in, even if I got, because I've had a lot of iwi interest. I think iwi are much more on board with this around the country. And as you would have heard yourself, there are many that are really on the go now in terms of getting hemp grown. In fact, New Zealand could literally cover itself with it and not meet the world market. Like I said, I'm interested in the fibre aspect and the seed aspect. That's what I'm interested in for this area. So if people want to go for a medicalised marijuana or that whole sort of that type of medicinal side of it, it seems oversubscribed to me. And the area that we really need to be focusing on is the Fibre N Seed and the potential around all of that.
Well, could you explain that a little bit, but elucidate on the seed, some of the properties therein?
Well, the thing I remember the most with it was trying that whole seed, and then the speakers on cannabinoids and how good this can be for human life and for animal life. When you look at that 30-year longitudinal study that they did in Jamaica with breastfeeding mums, that ate hulled seed and these sorts of products, that their children nearly on every level were above in progressing and in health were above just about anywhere else in the world. And not so much, no illness, all of these types of things. And cannabinoids, I'm not an expert. I have to say I'm absolutely not an expert on this, but I want the opportunity for people, like we have Massey down the road, who were heavily involved in getting that Hemp Summit going. They're very keen to work with us. At this point in time, I have put it before council that we look into hemp. It was voted down 10-2. So 9-2. I don't have very strong backup at the moment, but that's not stopping me from looking further into it, because I believe as a councillor, we can be an enabler. As a council, we simply have to know everything around hemp now, because probably by the end of the year, a lot of things are going to be in place. You heard guest speakers from the Crown. You heard chief executives of various bodies that are Crown associated, all saying that at the very least, councils are going to have to know their stuff on hemp and hemp production and medicalised marijuana in a very short time. So let's get on board with it.
Have you considered putting up some form of framework or position within the council specifically tailored to a role of such a description?
Well, that's why I brought a councillor with me to the Hemp Summit, and why I brought a major grower of vegetables with me and a major player in terms of iwi and what they're looking for, because I wanted to get a bit of an idea of what they actually thought independently after that Hemp Summit.
And what did they tell you about it?
Oh, it's a no-brainer, mate. I think any council should be really looking into this. How can they enable and how can they make things as easy as possible for people that want to get into the industry?
Have any projections been made on what kind of effects it would have just on the economy locally?
Well, there's been no in-depth work done by my council, because the vote has been they don't even want to look at it, not even a discussion on it. So it's a little bit of a rock and a hard place, but through the backing that I'm getting from different landowners who are saying they'd be interested to have a look. So what you also remember from this district, there was also Farmlands that also sent some people to that conference, and there were some other independents from this area that were there as well, and I had no knowledge that they were going to be there. So we have already met. We've had a little bit of we had a debrief, and we're planning another one to see, well, how can we actually get the interest of council in this? I mean, honestly, I cannot believe what I heard at that conference in terms of the range of what can be done with fibre and with seed.
Mm. It seems to me that the range we're talking about is seemingly an all-encompassing type of thing, from Bluff to Cape Reinga. It could be growing in every small town, in every big city, could be benefiting not only the health of the general population, because to me, I like to think of things on a much broader scale, not just, hey, does this one thing do that one thing? I like to look at it in a meta-fabric scale. So if you did something across the entire country, let's say, theoretically, if eating whole hemp seed was, let's say, mandatory, or there was simply a cultural push and everybody started having that for breakfast, you would have a cascade of health improvements across the board, according to a lot of the research that's been seen. And it's shown, economically speaking, that healthy people are more productive, they can think clearer, and there's an on-flow effect from that. So if everybody who's doing every job was suddenly doing it a bit better, you have that meta effect across things, and each of those things that one person's doing better, that cascades over again. So it's essentially a juggernaut of improvement. And I think that a lot of people who are not so knowledgeable about cannabis, or have yet to do their research on it, that ignorance of it and the stigma of 90 years of prohibition, this is your brain on weed, that might actually be the one impediment. And as soon as you pull those blocks out, that whole juggernaut's just going to start rolling forward and we'll see perceived benefits for generations to come?
Well, I think so. I'd put my name forward as a supposed community leader to be part of any trial, and maybe we should start at the top, that the decision makers, it can't hurt them, the decision makers are the people that are used in these types of studies. Might as well start at the top, and if it's working for them, well, then they'll have a lot less lot less opposition and be more likely to tick the boxes that we need to really get this industry started. It's a carbon credit crop, for God's sake. So let's use all of these. Let's use all of these things. So I'm saying I agree with you. We need to have these studies done here because, from what I've observed, there's very little being done in the way of formal studies in New Zealand. We're relying on everything we've seen overseas, and a lot of those speakers were at this New Zealand IHEP summit for the 2 days, and you'll recall that many of them said that they'd never been to a better summit to do with hemp anywhere in the world, because this summit included ministers of the Crown. It included people who are in charge of all of the wherewithal to do with changing the Medicines Act, the Health Act, all of these sort of people. You had academia there, you had people that were heavily into the industry overseas and were major providers of seeds, and we learnt a lot about their path, because they had a difficult path as well in their own countries. I don't see why we need to make it a difficult path here. I'm sure that a number of academics, a number of people in the business, a number of elected leaders around the communities would actually take part in something like this. That would be the way to fast track any types of studies that are necessary to push it forward in Aotearoa.
Where are the edges? By that I mean, where does local government's authority end and central government's authority begin? Reason I'm asking is, what if, theoretically, again, a local city council passed an amendment to its council bylaws saying that cannabis is now legal in this town, or industrial hemp is now legal within the bounds of this thing? Is that actually theoretically even possible under current New Zealand legislation? Do local councils have that much power to just say, look, we're not going to wait for you guys with all of your BS studies, we're going to start it right now, small scale, so that it doesn't go crazy, and we're going to pay very close attention, and we're going to recoup the benefits while all the rest of you are stuck in the debating chamber worrying about whether or not it's a good idea?
Well, I think that that's possibly feasible, not in my council, because I've had 9 vote against that. But say, for example, I wanted to request that from government, that we could do that, I would have to have that resolution passed in my council. Now, say that it did pass. To get it to government, I would then need to ask 6 other councils around somewhere in the country if they would put that same resolution to their councils in support of my council. So it was my council, Horowhenua District Council, and only then can I actually get it to an organisation called Local Government New Zealand. Now, Local Government New Zealand is actually a corporate body. It's the bastardisation of democracy, in my view, but that's a corporate body, and then it is the decision through local government as to what they're going to talk to national politics about to get it before Parliament. That's how crazy our system is at the moment.
It's only, if I may, it's only crazy if you think that benefiting society is a good idea. If you think that benefiting yourself and not society is a good idea, I believe what we've currently got is a perfect system for keeping that in place. A very well thought out system. A system that you can't get through. A system that has absolute authority, that's independent of government authority, because, as you said, it's a corporate board. It's not actually held accountable to the rule of law, Public Records Act, and other things like that, is it?
I don't think we have a very good system of local governance at the moment. That's about the best I can say on that, Vinny, for all the reasons I just told you. I can't really add to that, I think that central government has to, in a sense, do an audit on how effective local government is now under the 1989 Local Government Act, which is 30 years old, and I think needs a really good, thorough looking into as to how effective it is, or is it just benefiting the few to have control over the many? And that's how I see it. To be a mayor, to go through the rigmarole just to even see a cabinet minister or a minister in parliament, I can tell you that I literally cannot get an audience with anybody on any topic. Everything seems to have to be geared to go through local government New Zealand, and that is a corporate entity. And I think the whole system needs to be reviewed. So that's a little bit off topic in terms of hemp, but it also does affect, in my opinion, how quickly we could actually get hemp and hemp seed and product actually up and running.
It appears we've stumbled across the stumbling block. Had that process been different, I'm sure hemp could have been legalised around councils for the last 30 years plus.
I'm not altogether...
speaking, but...
and that is theoretically speaking, but it's possible too. But you've just got to look around at how many councils are so in debt. It's nothing like in previous times. We were all living within our budgets and that. I hardly know of any councils that don't have any massive debt. And you can't do a heck of a lot about it given everything that government heaps on us. But in return, we have to go to the begging bowl just to speak to them. So local government, to me, is in a serious situation and has been for a number of years. And it doesn't just revolve, it revolves around everything. How we get our environment sorted out, how we can get initiatives that are new to New Zealand, such as the hemp industry, really actively up and running. And I say that far too few have far too much power for the most of us. Simple.
I completely agree with that statement. 10 years as a journalist in New Zealand, talking to activist politicians and things of that nature, they all have that exact same experience of thinking that you're doing what's right, doing what is logical, doing what is evidence-based, and being blocked at every turn.
Then try getting try getting the press to give an equitable coverage of both sides of whatever the issue is. You just don't anymore. There are no more investigative journalists. Like, I look at journalism now and stuff and all of these things, and I think, God help us, how are we ever going to make change unless we start having media starting to feel that they're unimpeded a little and won't lose all of their advertising revenue or printery work or whatever else they might lose, which will shut them down. This is happening to most local papers around the New Zealand, actually. And local papers, to me, are the absolute critical essence of getting good information out. And yet I see that they, in real terms, don't anymore because they fear for their very existence.
This is how the internet has come in, and is indeed the very reason that we're doing this podcast today, Michael, on our own platform here, because of the fact, just this last year that I've been the web and social media chief of the Legalise Cannabis Party, I have seen umpteen things that the New Zealand media should have, like to any logical person, come immediately to the party and asked our opinion on it during the election. And sometimes they sent invites, we'd prepare enormous statements, and then we'd never make it into the issue. Sometimes they'd send us lists of questions for television interviews and never ask us the questions that we'd prepared for, and completely twixt us. So I believe that even local council, citizen journalists, minor political parties, and anybody who really feels that the media is not representing them, they need to understand that the power is and always has been in your hands to use modern technology to amplify your voice. In the modern context of information and how there is a war on for people's consciousness, essentially, we must understand that once upon a time people knew how to use swords to defend themselves, because they knew if they did not know how to defend themselves with a sword, they may very well die upon one. Today, the information and these tools that we use today to get that information out there is our modern equivalent of a sword, and we must use it to protect people who are suffering, to tell their stories, and to get the truth out about everything, regardless of how it makes us feel.
Well, I go along. Well, you're a wordy man. I go along with most of that, but I will say that I've used my own social media a lot over the last few years. I'm not that great on computers, but I know how to take a film, post it, because the opportunity to speak without interference or changing the articles you've written with newspapers is becoming less and less. And I just think you have to create your own media to get the truth across. Because myself personally, I am bloody sick and tired of the take that media, written media, take on a lot of what I say. It becomes another story. It isn't even in the context of what you've said, whether it be live streaming council meetings or whatever. And it's frightening. It's absolutely frightening. And that just doesn't happen here. You look globally, for example, even the American, you never saw anything on Bernie Sanders, who had bigger crowds, bigger everything, better policies. You hardly heard a word. You hardly see anything of the extent of the lava flows in Hawaii, just how massive they are. You hardly see anything unless you're looking at smaller organisations such as yourself, to a lesser extent me, or anything like that. If you want the real news, you actually have to look at that and look at the film footage, because a picture speaks 1,000 words. And that's why I think a number of these media outlets such as yours are starting to gain traction, but we don't get everyone, because they will still look at the 6 o'clock news on television and take it for reality, and it's not anymore.
Yeah. Theoretically, it may never have been.
I agree.
A great documentary for those people who want to understand how the media has basically, for lack of a better term, placed the entire world under mind control. Have a look at a BBC documentary called The Century of Self, and the life story of Edward Bernays, whose first book was called Propaganda. The man who literally wrote the book on propaganda and literally created the institution known as public relations, has infested essentially the advertising protocols of everybody. They changed one fundamental principle of advertising, only one, that it wasn't about the product anymore, it was about the perception of the product. And now, if you've got a political party, it isn't about your political party, it's about the perception of your political party. That's why they cover things up, because there's things that they don't want you to know. The Legalise Cannabis Party doesn't have to do that, because we've been telling the same story, i.e. the truth, for 20 years.
Yeah, and you put up a good philosophical argument there across the board, and I know that we're here talking about hemp today, and there's not a lot that I disagree with you on. It's we have to work out a better measure in how to fairly inform people, and I think that in my social media pages, I never bag anybody. I don't do hate speeches. I don't do any of that. I just put up what I think people need to see in this area, because there's many people that don't drive a car or get anywhere. So I often just, if I'm cruising past something, see something interesting, I'll film it, for them or whoever else wants to listen. And it's very amazing what things actually interest people. And hemp is huge. 1080 is huge. The condition of our awa, our waterways, that's huge. These sorts of things. And we don't often see the reality of any of those broadcast on mainstream. And so that is why, that's why I took the decision to talk with you today, because a lot of people might say, oh, you're talking to Aotearoa Legalise Cannabis Party. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, I am. I talk with anybody, and I'll talk on the subjects that they want to talk about, because what's there to lose in trying to get out a more balanced perspective in so many areas that I think fundamentally there is no balance anymore in this country. And I personally, I'm getting called a dictator and all sorts of things here because, in fact, I even had to sort of have somebody trick their way into me even seeing a cabinet minister 2 weeks ago. I would not have got that interview with the cabinet minister unless a former MP had made the appointment. So I apologised to the MP when I met him and said, I didn't actually know that you didn't know I was coming, but I do understand why this person did this. I have not been able to speak literally with any MP in Parliament. It's just evasiveness on the things that I want to talk about, which are not about hemp. Hemp, the government is talking about it because they were at the summit. And that was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
It was good to see their presence. And what was another interesting aspect of one thing the ministers actually elucidated on is the reason why hemp and all associated cannabis products, including medical recreation, is because of that Misuse of Drugs Act. It just happens to be in there, and therefore it can't actually be reviewed under any separate government department, but by the Medicines Act and drug councils and things of that nature. So again, just one of those other roadblocks that are in there. Now, I was thinking tactically, right? How do you control a crowd? How do you get that 2 councillors into support out of 11 up to 11 out of 11? And oftentimes what needs to happen is you don't look at the issue that you know that person disagrees with. You find out one thing that they do agree with, and you start talking about that. And you roundabout get the way back to the original argument, and you've got them converted. It's essentially... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I do agree with that. I am in a different council here, and anybody that follows local body politics in the country, and I know that many of the mayors watch my social page. I mean, literally in this area, I can say white and it'll be a black vote, or I can say black and it'll be a white vote, because I do know a number of councillors. I absolutely know that a couple of them, if this wasn't the situation in this area, and they hadn't made various commitments very early on to support the CE and not the mayor. I mean, that was a half-page ad when I'd only been in for 1 week. So in a way, I think a lot of it's personality-based and forgetting to look at the issues. My council struggles to look past anything but development. That's it. To be turned down on even looking at hemp, even looking at different water supply alternatives, looking at public transport and regular run commuter trains, all of these things given very little cognizance in this council. So, there's elections next year, so you've got to decide whether you want to go do any more of this banging your head up against the wall. But I believe that if I had a council that had an open mind towards things, I think we'd be on our way with this initiative and some others to at least look at it much more deeply in terms of being a council that helps enable things to happen.
Let's find some good people in the Horowhenua to better represent
There's a lot
council.
of good people. No, I want to say that the Horowhenua is a wonderful area. I love it. I live here. I wouldn't have stood for mayoralty if I didn't like the area. I stood for mayoralty because I see a lot of ways that we can move forward. As I say again, we literally have nothing to offer our young people coming through for their futures in this district. We are very much becoming a super aged area where people are coming to retire to. That is happening here. How do we keep our young people? How do we keep a lot of people here? Because if you're not a school teacher or a retailer or work for a social service outfit, your only opportunity in real terms is killing chickens and being involved in primary industry. And we are the food bowl for the country, we're told. I'd like to see how that is all run much better in terms of our environment as well. So we are a different area here, but it's not going to stop me pushing what I believe. And when I stood, I was the only one that had anything like a manifesto. And I'm sticking to the things that I promised I would try and do. That's why I got voted in. Just as much as Labor was a huge surprise for many people, and the paradigm shift in what they're doing, much of which I support, the same happened to me here. It was totally, absolutely not expected that I would be mayor. No way. And that shows me how many people in this area actually want change, want to look at things like we're discussing now, want to look at how we can really improve our environment, because it's just crap to say that we're improving it, you know? And if we don't have good awa, we don't have good drinking water, we don't have good recreational water, if we don't have really top drawer infrastructure, all of these things, and our council's working hard in various aspects, but that's come about through people like myself and many people that have been pushing for this stuff for years. It isn't just suddenly a brainwave by somebody high up in management and council, but you would think it was somebody else's idea, given that these things are changing. So that's good enough. You don't need to have recognition of everything as long as things are changing. And so to that end, I believe we've had a lot of big changes here, even though I'm a minority mayor myself. I love the interaction with all of the people that I have here on a daily basis. I love the fact that people come up and give me a hug and say, please keep going, please stand again, you don't know who I am, and then I ask them, well, who are you? You know, people want change. Hemp is an area that is massively exciting, hugely exciting for any district in the country, not just ours, but I believe we have very good opportunities here. We're very narrow in terms of width as a district, reasonably long. But the thing is, if we have a centralised plant to work on hemp, a centralised processing plant, nobody has to travel too far. So we don't have these big impediments with travel costs. We're ideally situated to really look at the situation of regional hemp growing, not a little 10-acre block here. You know, I've had one iwi group that has 2,000 acres, and they're very, very much wanting to look into the prospect of not only hemp, but manuka and some other plants that they're talking about growing that all have a much high-end use and high-end income.
And
as well as keeping our environment nice and clean.
That's right. And during the Hemp Summit, they espoused a lot of very, very practical knowledge about just how difficult hemp itself actually is to harvest, because after 90 years of prohibition, the normal developments that have gone into cell phones and TVs and things like that and cars haven't gone into the same as the hemp industry. So New Zealand is full of very, very creative people. I'm one of them. And what I did here, I've got a little thing I want to show people up here, is I've made a little design for a hemp harvester. It's like a little dome shape, and it rips the whole hemp plant out of the middle, funnels it through the central core of the machine, gets all that dust off and that kind of thing, with a few vacuum vents and things like that around it, so it vacuums up all of the dust and abrasive pollen and things like that, and just leaves it on the ground. So there's a whole bunch of like little ideas like that. And you talked about regional things. What Chris Woodney, I think it was, from the New Zealand Hemp Foundation said is that in China at the moment they found that mobile processing facilities are actually quite fantastic, and because hemp's so versatile, you need a number of different machines to actually process it on site, and this can all just be on the back of a big trailer and that kind of thing. So you've got a 3D printer and a solvent extraction module, so you can get oil directly off of that hemp. Seed and husk module, so you can dehull it and then just place it out into a nice little pile there. Fibre processing module that strips it and thrashes it nice and automatically, and a root and dirt separation model, so you can actually get the whole plant, including the roots and every single part of it, as well as ethanol extraction for biofuel, all on the one back of a trailer. and you can 3D
Well, the
print
thing
it
with
into
that
anything.
is, it's interesting you should say that, and I see that the letterhead on one of those pictures you showed was Massey University, and I think that's what's the interesting part, because once this industry starts burgeoning in this country and gets going, and like the likes of Massey, they're looking into that whole horticultural aspect of it, but they
Dr.
also,
Kim
the rest of
Pickering,
the university could be, once this really gets going, I see universities looking at, okay, how do we make the machinery around all this as well in terms of the engineering degrees, and they can utilise that sort of ability in amongst their students and lecturers that have engineering ability. So it's not just about the growing. Everything's going to revolve around engineering. So clothing, for example, if it's made of hemp, you're going to need fashion designers, you're going to need people that can create the machinery that weaves it all, all of this sort of stuff, literally everything. It's not just about growing about it, everything that it is going to be, or whatever you design or whatever you're not. So say you're making replacement plastic bags, well then machinery is going to have to be made to actually make those type of bags. And if they can do it in the Pacific Islands and make plastic bag equivalents out of taro, you can't tell me that here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we haven't got the wherewithal to be able to design the specific engineering we need for whatever use that fibre or the seed is going to be. So I think we're in a key position in this country because our engineers are sought after all over the world as it is. And so when we start looking at the different ranges of product we could make, we can build houses out of this stuff. We can build houses out of the fibre, and it's a very cheap form of making a house. That was well and truly explained to us at this conference. So for me, it's just mind-numbing not to be able to progress as fast as I'd like to in this area, but you've got to keep on putting out the message, letting people hear what you're saying. I'm no expert. I want the experts to be the ones that are advising us in how to achieve all of this.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking as you were speaking. Is like you have a look at these great engineers, these great inventors, these people like Dr. Kim Pickering at the University of Waikato, who did in fact speak at the Hemp Summit about the various range of hemp plastic fibres and things of that nature that can be manufactured from it right here in Aotearoa. So let's think about this logically. Ultimately, there is going to have to be a change in central government. That actually hadn't been entirely clear to me now until interviewing you today, Michael. And that's probably why it's important to get the Legalise Cannabis Party in there, because we are specialists. We know our stuff, and we are willing to listen to experts with the engineering know-how and international hemp growers and anybody who is essentially willing to make this country a better place along that vein of thinking, ensuring full transparency within the government and making sure that things run in a just fashion. That's what we really need ultimately. Now, I did want to address something to the audience as well. Our president, former president, Stephen Wilkinson, said in one of his podcasts that one of ALCP's goals is once we get elected to Parliament, we're going to leave. That's not the case. We plan to actually stay in there, serve our electorates honourably, and ensure that this country keeps its word now and forever when it comes to cannabis. So thank you very much, Michael, for joining me today. And do you have any last final statements before we close this puppy up?
Yeah, I would say that you're a very good politician, Vinny, and pushing your party. So good on you for that. And I was here to talk about the hemp and the Fibre N Seed. I thank you for the opportunity. And anything that progresses looking at this in a way that is totally sustainable, which it will be, that will be of immense value to our country and to our different districts. I support anything like this, and I think that it is myopic thinking not to be looking into opportunities around hemp in any district in this country. So thank you for your time, and thank you to whoever's watching this, and all the best with the other activities you're pushing as well, Vinny.
Oh, thanks, Brian. I've got quite a few things that a lot of people might find spurious, so you may want to take that one back. Anyway, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. Michael Feyen, the Mayor of the Horowhenua, the Right Honourable Mayor, and he has.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, Vinny.
Yeah, that's right. If you do not risk, you cannot accumulate, ladies and gentlemen. So put yourselves, put your life, put your fortune, and put your consciousness on the line. And the only way that we can get change in this country is if you commit to it. Like Michael has, like I have, like everybody else who's making change in this country, tiny bit by tiny bit. It is our resolve and commitment that gets things done, not our selfishness.
Yeah, and the opportunity to hear what actually can be done. So thank you for that. I'll see you all later, and I'll head off to my first meeting for the day, or second one.
Thank you very much. Catch you later, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay then. Peace. See you all.